Hello and welcome to Retail Management BUS302, our week 4, lecture 2 video. This week we are talking about retail strategy and location. And in lecture 1, we reviewed the different types of locations that retailers can choose from. We talked about both planned and unplanned, as well as some temporary or non-traditional locations that retailers may choose from. And this video, what we really want to focus on is talking about how we can match our location and our strategy, right? And how that the shopping behavior of consumers and how all this mixes, right? So how does this location area really affect our retail strategy? And so what we want to do is start thinking about how consumers behave, what consumers want, right? And think about that as part of our decision making. So, if we remember convenience, right? Some consumers just want minimal effort. They just want to go and get what they need to get and leave, right? So, if you're in that that's your primary target market, right? That convenient shopping area, that's going to affect where you're going to locate your store. If consumers have more of an involved decision purchase, right? Or more of an involved decision where they need to do some comparison shopping, you may want to locate in an area where there are other like retailers. Maybe that's, if you think about that with cars, right? Maybe that's why all the car dealers are in one area. It makes it easier for a consumer to go through this decision process, not having to drive 100 miles each way, right? So that can be more of a destination type thing. And then there's also this other area, specialty type shopping, where a customer knows what they want. They're not going to accept any other anything else. They're willing to pay a premium. You might be able to locate someplace else. So when you start thinking about how locations, the way your consumer behaves, the type of product you have is going to affect your location in the long run, right? So along with this, right? So depending on your consumer behavior, you need to also think about, okay, well, how dense or where does my target market, where are my consumers living, right? So a good location has a lot of people that you are trying to target living in it, right? So you have to think about that. And then also the uniqueness of your retail offering. These are all things that you would want to think about, right? So this could be important things. Now, as we think about where we want to locate with our retail strategy, right? So how does this, what kind of store are we and who's our target market and all that? There's some things that we need to think about as far as, the societal changes and those things that are happening in the bigger picture, things like urban sprawl, right? So as I mentioned in lecture video 1, prior to World War II, right, you had the downtown area, commercial hub, people would go downtown. There's that downtown commercial district, right, that people would go to. And then people started leaving the cities and everything else. Now, this is also after World War II. You have interstate highways, suburbs growing, right? That changed everything. So now you have this idea of urban sprawl, okay, right? So you've got people living in different parts of an area. They drive to work. They have to pass a lot of places, right? This can also cause things like concentrated poverty. You might have more racial economic segregation. And it's not really, sometimes it's not intentional. It just happens as things, right? So as people move out of the city, rents come down, right? So there's all these things, right? So you have these migration to the suburbs, right? But now what we're seeing as we move into the 21st century, we're seeing this idea of the gentrification, where we see people that once were moving out to the suburbs, all their kids are gone and they want to be more downtown. They don't want, right? So now they're selling their homes, they're moving downtown. So we see the redevelopment of downtown areas, right? So there's all these things that we need to consider. Now, one of the other big areas that you need to think about is, as well as you start thinking about this, maybe you live in a state where they don't like big box stores because they think that a big box store is going to drive out local business. It's going to kill the downtown areas, right? Or they're going to hire too many part-time workers and, right, all these different things, which is true. Now, my home state where I was born in Vermont, and that's why I've got this here, right? So you've got Vermont, which they were the last state to add a Walmart store to it because they oppose big box stores, right? And as this little thing here notes, as of 2012, Walmart had only managed to open 4 stores in Vermont, and Target wasn't able to open any. But the Dollar Generals, the Family Dollars, right? These smaller companies were able to move in and able to, because they have that smaller store format. So depending, right, see, these are legal considerations that now you need to worry about is, are we going to be able to get in these? So these are some things to think about. Again, zoning, how the land is regulated, right? So, and when you start thinking about zoning, some of the cities, you can have residential, commercial, mixed residential, industrial, or special. And so depending on what the zoning is, maybe you will or will not be able to open a store. So when you think about zoning, right, this is the city of Superior, their zoning maps. So they've got all these different things. They've got waterfront. They've got the R1A, which is family resident, the traditional homes, R1B, then 2-family residential, apartment buildings, right? Then you have manufacturing, all these different things. So sometimes cities have planned out how they want things to look, and they have a zoning map that you have to deal with. This is something that I had to deal with as a consultant for one of my clients many years ago, to work with a couple of counties and the state and everything else as we were trying to create for our nonprofit that we were working with. We were working on developing our own property because we own 30 acres, and we had to work through the zoning issues of that, right? So this is a huge part of a huge consideration when you start looking at where you're going to locate zoning. Could be building codes, right? Signs are a huge issue. Some locations do not allow signs, say, okay, you can't have signs that are higher than this, right? And if you don't have signage, how are people going to know whether or not you're in business? So building codes can affect you. Licensing requirements, all these things. And by the way, these aren't national, these are all local. So it depends on where you locate. So this could be a lot of work on the front end, trying to decide where to locate and everything else. So when you're going through all this, how do you evaluate these areas to decide, okay, well, do I really want to put my store there? Right. So you have to think now with the strategic fit. Okay, is this a good place? Do we have lots of consumers that are going to want to, that are in my target market and everything else? You have to think about, is there a lot of competition? What about the cost? Is this going to be a high cost area, a low cost area? Right. Then the economic conditions of these areas. So you have all these things. Right. So when you start thinking about this, and you're trying to evaluate different locations, a metropolitan area, there could have, that's a core urban area, more than 50,000 or more inhabitants. And then you have the micropolitan statistical area, right? So this is a little bit further out, and it can go up to 100 miles. So depending on where you are, you have to look at first, how many people are there? Okay. If you're talking about the city I live in a city where in a 10-mile radius, we have 12,000 people. Not a lot of people, right? So these are things that you'd want to, so if you go to like a Minneapolis where there's a couple 100,000 people, these are things that you would want to consider as you are putting together your, making a decision for your location. Now, economic conditions, it's not just the population that you need to think about, but you also need to think about, are we going to be able to hire people? What's the employment rate? What's the what's the unemployment rate, right? How much competition, some operating costs, all those things. These are things that you want to think about. So then you start thinking about places like this, right? This is the east side of Seattle. This is a really nice location because it's really close to Microsoft corporate headquarters. So you've got a lot of people that have the means to shop there. So therefore, it is a rather nice upscale shopping area. So that could be something that you'd want to consider. All right. So also need to think about how many stores are within that area, right? How many other stores are within a certain driving distance, and not just competitors, but also your own company, right? So if you think about Starbucks, which we mentioned, I think last week, which has, Starbucks like on, they might be 2 or 3 blocks apart, right? Then you can enter into this thing called cannibalization, where the sales of one store are taken away from the sales of another store. So you don't want to have too many stores within one area with one geographic location, but you also don't want to have too few. So that's one of those other considerations that you need to bring in. Okay. So as we evaluate our locations, it's not just all of those items, but once we get, say, maybe we like this one area, this one suburb and everything else, now you need to think about the site. Okay, we've decided we want to be in this city, and now we pick a site. Now we need to think about traffic flow. And how easy is it going to be to get in and out of our location? And so some companies have a rule, and like Walgreens has a rule. They will only build stores on corners, right? So they want to have people to be able to access and their particular locations from 2 areas on a corner, right? So they'll only buy and build on corner locations, right? So traffic flow and accessibility. So you have to think about natural barriers. Are there any artificial barriers? Natural barriers would be like a river or something like that. Artificial barriers, as far as maybe a city or something. How congested is the parking? Is this good visibility? So as you start now, we think about the geographic area. Now we're looking at a very specific site, right? So you think about a Best Buy store, which we mentioned in the last video. They have they might be an anchor store, right? So the parking that might be one that they need to think about when they're building their location is, well, how much parking is going to be there? Right? We need to have enough room. So that's a huge consideration. Along the same lines, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought here. The other things that you want to think about with locations, what about especially if you're inside, like a mall, right? What about your adjacent tenants, right? Who else is going to be in the mall with you, right? So one of the thoughts is this idea of cumulative attraction, right? So if you have both Rolex and PJ, right, some high-end retail items, people that are going to be shopping for Rolex are also going to be shopping for PJ, and they'll probably be shopping for Louis Vuitton and other things, right? So those types of stores should be in closer proximity to one another because it'd be more convenient. So you want to think about the cumulative attraction. So who's going to be close to you? So especially in like a shopping center or an enclosed mall area. So this is going to be one of these things that you want to think about. Okay. And then finally, right? So again, locations within a shopping center, something you want to think about. All of these things are going to affect sales and occupancy costs. If you have the strip shopping center, so when you're thinking about that, the one that's closest to the supermarket is going to be more expensive. So, right. So if you're in a strip mall, strip center, and you've got, the grocery store on one end, and you want to be the store right next to it, it's going to be more expensive because people are going to be coming and going, right? You've got that natural foot traffic from the supermarket. And within an enclosed shopping mall, right? So retailers who sell comparative goods, you may want to locate to a department store anchor. So if you are a Foot Locker, you might want to be really close to a Shields or a Dick's Sporting Goods if it's an anchor, right? So that might be something to help you drive your sales, right? Target markets, locate those stores that are, within if you have a similar target market to another store, you might want to locate somewhere close to them. So again, more traffic, you're going to drive more sales. So these are all things that you want to think about when you're trying to find the ideal location. And so with that, we're going to end video number 2, and we'll pick up in video number 3.